When you think of the United States Marine Corps, what comes to mind? Probably images of legendary adaptability, fierce resilience, and just this unwavering commitment, right, to being a premier fighting force ready for anything, anywhere. They have this incredible reputation, developing agile warfighters, keen leaders, quick problem solvers. Now, you, our sharp-eyed listener, recently sent us an absolutely critical and, well, incredibly timely piece of research. It's Eric Dios's dissertation, Bridging the Gap, analyzing educational inequities between enlisted Marines and Marine officers amid calls for modernized training. Quite a title. Okay, let's unpack this a bit. Our mission today, really, is to dig into a fascinating and frankly vital question. Are the educational opportunities within the Marine Corps truly equitable for everyone, from the newest enlisted Marine right up to a seasoned officer? Because, if the Marines are all about being the best, their training should reflect that commitment across the board. Makes sense, right?
It does. And what's truly compelling here, it isn't just a simple question of fairness, though that's certainly a huge ethical piece. This research, it delves right into the very core of the Marine Corps' ongoing modernization efforts and its readiness for future combat. So this deep dive is going to uncover some pretty significant disparities, differences in how the USMC educates its officer enlisted ranks, especially when it comes to their foundational military occupational specialty training, the MOS training.
That specialized job training everyone needs.
Exactly. The skills for their specific role.
And we're basing this exploration primarily on this one, really comprehensive dissertation. It's a remarkable piece of work. It used qualitative interviews with formal school academics officers. These are the folks, literally in the classrooms, overseeing the training programs. Their insights give us this unfiltered look at what's really happening on the ground. Right at the core of Dios's study is this, undeniable perception of inequity. It strongly suggests enlisted Marines might not be getting the same quality of educational experience as officers, particularly in those critical entry-level MOS training programs. And here's the kicker. This seems to be happening despite the Marine Corps' big push for modernization. Things like Training and Education 2030, that's their strategic roadmap for learning. And Marine Corps Doctrinal Publication 7, which guides their training strategies. You'd think with clear directives like that, everyone would be moving in lockstep. But this research, it seems to tell a different story.
It really does. What the study reveals is a stark distinction, a difference in the learning objectives themselves and the focus of the content. It effectively creates what one participant in this study actually called a cognitive divide right within the force.
Yeah, here's where it really makes you pause and think. You might intuitively assume, okay, everyone in the Marines gets a similar rigorous learning experience.
Sure.
Uniformity, right. But this research points to a clear, fundamental difference. For officers, their training is geared towards preparing them for what the study calls higher-order cognitive tasks.
Yeah.
So we're talking strategic thinking, decision-making, complex staff planning, and obviously extensive leadership preparation. One academics officer put it very clearly. They said, "We teach the platoon commander how to think. The enlisted Marines support their platoon commander, but the officer must understand the tactics, the theory, and the broader strategy behind each operation." That's a profound statement.
It is. And conversely, this is where the disparity really sharpens. Enlisted Marines often get what's described as task-based and competency-driven instruction. The core emphasis here seems to be on technical execution and, surprisingly often, civil rote memorization.
Just memorizing facts and procedures.
Apparently so, in many cases. Another academic officer summed it up quite starkly, actually. They stated, "The difference, I would say, is the doers and the thinkers. About 75% of the enlisted side is the doing, whereas the officer corps is a little bit kind of inverted."
Wow. So it's not just a subtle difference, it's a foundational divergence in how they're being shaped educationally. And the depth of content they cover, that definitely reflects this divide too, right?
Absolutely. Officers are often described as being an inch deep and a mile wide. They get a broad understanding, the purpose, the methods behind operations.
Okay, the big picture.
Right. But enlisted Marines, in contrast, they need to understand systems from cradle to grave. That's the phrase used, covering material at a much deeper, more technical level.
Like what specifically?
Well, think about it. How to requisition parts, how to operate systems. That's intensely hands-on, very granular. It requires a profound level of specific technical knowledge.
Okay, that makes sense.
But, and this is crucial, this raises a really urgent question for us all. If enlisted Marines make up over 87% of the entire force, a huge majority, is this intense focus on technical execution and rote memorization truly preparing them for what the Marine Corps itself emphasizes, which is, quote, The cognitive demands of combat scenarios were less of a focus on the rote memorization of processes and procedures and more on creative thought based upon greater individual capabilities and advanced military skill sets.
Right. Is the training matching the stated need for future fights?
Exactly. It's a critical point because future readiness really hinges on this.
So it's becoming clear that what they learn is fundamentally different. That's established. But what about the how they learn? Does this divide extend to the actual classroom experience, how they're taught, how they're assessed?
It absolutely does. The instructional methodologies, the way they teach, really diverge between these two groups. Officer training, for instance, frequently uses much more active and student-centric approaches.
Like what kind of things?
Well, pre-reads as part of a flipped classroom model, where they study material before class. Teach-backs to demonstrate understanding to their peers and instructors, scenario-based learning through role-playing. Things like tactical decision games, TDGs they call them, which were like these high-stakes simulations forcing quick decisions.
Sounds intense.
Oh, yeah. And decision-forcing exercises, BFEs, similar but pushing them into realistic combat scenarios, even extensive wargaming. Officers are very much expected to, quote, read it, teach their peers, and almost take charge.
Taking ownership of the learning.
Precisely. And many of them, coming straight from college, they actually prefer this more autonomous self-study model. It feels familiar.
Okay, that sounds incredibly dynamic. Very engaging. But for enlisted Marines, the picture you're painting, based on the research, is quite different.
It is. The research shows their methodologies are still largely passive and pretty, well, traditional. Meaning predominantly PowerPoint-driven lectures prior to practical application. Then followed by repetitive drills and that recurring theme of rote memorization.
Still heavy on PowerPoint, huh?
Seems so.
Yeah.
One participant observed, almost kind of lamenting it, the POI looks very similar to what it looked like 10, 15 years ago. We're still walking them through steps with charts.
And the POI, just to remind everyone, is the program of instruction, the curriculum blueprint.
That's right. And this kind of instruction, as you can imagine, it discourages autonomy. It discourages deeper understanding. Often, it leads to just temporary learning, just, quote, long enough to take the test, and then they can just forget about it.
Which, yeah, in a combat situation is a truly dangerous proposition. That knowledge needs to stick.
Absolutely. And these differences, they extend directly into how Marines are evaluated. Officer evaluations often focus heavily on leadership capabilities, frequently involving detailed briefings to instructors, assessing their critical thinking, their presentation skills.
Some more performance-based assessment.
You could say that. Whereas enlisted Marines, conversely, often take multiple choice tests at the end of the week.
Ah, okay. More traditional testing.
Very much so. And if we kind of zoom out and connect this to the bigger picture, proven adult learning theories, principles like Malcolm Knowles' adult learning theory, David Kolb's experiential learning theory, they both emphasize self-direction, problem-centered learning, applying past experiences.
Right. Learning by doing, applying knowledge.
Exactly. And the study clearly indicates that these modern, robust, proven methods, they're more consistently and thoroughly applied in officer training, much less so on the enlisted side.
Now, okay, beyond the classroom methods, the actual tools and resources available, this reveals another layer of disparity, right? Perhaps even more tangible. You'd think in, 2025 almost, technology would be a pretty level playing field, but that's not what the research found at all.
Not at all. It's actually a significant problem highlighted in the study. There are clear resource disparities impacting the quality of training, particularly in access to technology and support materials.
Give me an example.
Okay. Enlisted Marines, for example, often rely on paper-based guides, deal with limited classroom technology, and might just get a stapled packet of paper for their course material.
The stapled packet, seriously.
That's what the research indicates. It sounds almost archaic, doesn't it, in an era of digital learning. Meanwhile, officer courses might have smart boards on every wall, personal computers, and Wi-Fi for research.
Wow. That's like 2 different centuries of learning environments.
Paints that picture.
And this isn't just about fancy smartboards, is it? It trickles down to basics like hardware and internet access.
Exactly. While some enlisted schools are getting tablets, which sounds good. The hard truth is, as one participant noted, without Wi-Fi, they're just expensive notebooks.
Right. The infrastructure isn't there to support the tech.
Precisely. The lack of reliable internet is a major persistent issue, described as spotty at best, with promises for Wi-Fi that, quote, still hasn't happened after years.
That's a huge barrier.
It is. Contrast that with officers who typically bring their own laptops, often because they just came from college. That gives them a significant inherent advantage right there.
Yeah, imagine trying to do research or access modern info without reliable internet. It's a non-starter.
Absolutely. And this resource problem, it extends even to physical training equipment. The gear needed for hands-on practice.
Which is critical for MOS training.
Critical. The study found that if both officer and enlisted courses need a particular set of equipment, say a simulator or a specific comms gear, more often than not, we lean toward the officer corps. That's a direct quote.
Really? So the officers get priority?
It seems so, the quote continues. Enlisted get told, we'll get you on the back end. And this isn't just about preference, the study suggests. It points to a deeper issue of training command, often, quote, begging the fleet for more equipment. So, scarcity plays a role.
Okay, I see. But the prioritization still seems skewed.
It appears that way. Furthermore, look at student-to-instructor ratios, another huge disparity. An officer course might cap at, say, right around 22 Marines. Manageable.
Okay.
While an enlisted course could have a max class of 90 students for one or maybe a couple of instructors.
90. How can you possibly give individualized attention or facilitate active learning in a class that big?
It's practically impossible.
Yeah.
It severely limits those opportunities for enlisted Marines, creating a much less effective learning environment.
Okay, so we have stark differences in what they learn, how they learn it, and the tools they get to learn with. It really begs the question, why? Why does this gap persist, especially with modernization being an official goal? The research must dive into the barriers, right? What's stopping things from changing?
It does. And a major factor identified is maybe surprising, but also kind of understandable when you think about institutional inertia. It's stakeholder resistance.
Resistance from who?
Well, often from instructors themselves, resistance to modern teaching methods. Many, for instance, openly admit they've grown accustomed to the, quote, informal lecture with the aid of PowerPoint presentation for the last 15 years. And they resist change because, frankly, it's easier. PowerPoint has, in many cases, become a crutch, a default setting.
The path of least resistance.
Exactly. Some programs of instruction, those POIs, still looked eerily similar to old ones, despite explicit policies calling for modernization. It's just hard to change deeply ingrained habits and processes.
Okay, instructor habit makes sense, but is that the only resistance?
No, and this is really interesting. It's not just the instructors. Surprisingly, some students themselves, even officers sometimes, they don't like 21st century learning methods. Quote, they want information given to them, time to study, and then they want to apply it in the field. They prefer the passive lecture model, too.
So you have this dual resistance from both the teaching side and sometimes the learning side.
That's what the study suggests. And that makes enacting real systemic change much, much harder. It's like trying to turn a large ship when some crew are actively working against the turn.
Okay, so human factors are a big part. What else? Technology must play a role, too, beyond just access.
Definitely. Beyond simple access to hardware, the study points to significant technological limitations. Things like infrastructural failures, that spotty Wi-Fi we talked about, frustrating network restrictions due to cybersecurity concerns, which can lock down useful online tools, and just a persistent, overarching lack of funding that actively undermines efforts to implement digital learning tools effectively.
So even if you get the tablets, the ecosystem needed to make them truly useful often isn't there.
Precisely. That's why they end up as just expensive notebooks sometimes.
And finally, I imagine there are the classic organizational hurdles, bureaucracy, red tape.
Oh, yes. Structural and bureaucratic barriers are definitely mentioned. Curriculum changes, for example, can take an astonishing months or years for approval. One participant mentioned POIs being up for approval for a year now.
A year. How can you modernize quickly with that kind of timeline?
You really can't. And this frustratingly slow process, as you can imagine, it's demotivating to instructors. It creates a pervasive frustration among those actually trying to push for progress on the ground.
That sounds incredibly frustrating.
And then there's the funding constraints. A truly universal concern, it seems. A lack of funds impacts everything from, quote, basic instructional tools, easels, whiteboards, pens, up to multi-million-dollar simulators that could genuinely revolutionize training.
Wow, even basic supplies can be an issue.
According to the participants, yes. Moreover, several participants noted that many current policies are simply not wholly aligned with the modernization efforts they're supposed to support.
How so?
Well, there's this mixed messaging problem. Instructors are told to modernize, use active learning, but also, contradictorily, they're pressured to just push students through, get them graduated quickly.
Ah, efficiency versus effectiveness. A classic tension.
Exactly. And it fundamentally hinders real change. Policies often remain theory-based, lacking clear, actionable guidance for execution. It leaves instructors caught in the middle without a clear path forward.
Okay, putting this all together, when we consider the Marine Corps' absolute commitment to developing these agile, thinking warfighters, what does this ongoing disparity in education, the content, the methods, the resources, the barriers, what does it ultimately mean for the readiness of the entire force?
Well, the implications are truly significant. They impact both individual career development and, maybe more importantly, overall combat effectiveness.
Huh.
The findings strongly suggest the current system risks stunting the intellectual and leadership development of enlisted Marines, which, naturally, limits their professional growth. And it limits the effectiveness of the non-commissioned officers, the NCOs, and the staff NCOs, the SNCOs.
And these are the leaders often called the backbone of the Corps.
Exactly. As the study powerfully highlights, they are the backbone of the Marine Corps. So, if their foundational intellectual development is compromised by outdated training, it weakens the entire structure.
And in the context of modern warfare, looking ahead, this seems more critical now than ever before, right?
Absolutely. Future conflict, everyone agrees, demands critical thinking, adaptability, independent problem solving from all Marines, not just the officers at the top planning strategy.
Everyone needs to be able to think on their feet.
Everyone. So the continued reliance on, quote, outdated instructional models poses a direct threat to mission readiness, tactical innovation, and cohesion across rank cohorts.
If that vast majority of the force, that 87% who are enlisted, aren't fully equipped with the cognitive skills needed for complex, ambiguous future battles,
Then the entire force is operating at a profound disadvantage. It really becomes a national security issue, not just an internal USMC training problem.
that puts it starkly.
It does. It becomes abundantly clear that investing meaningfully, equitably, and urgently in the education of the enlisted ranks, it isn't merely about individual outcomes or fairness or career progression, though those matter. It is, quite unequivocally, a national security imperative, essential for the Marine Corps to maintain its operational superiority and to effectively thrive in 21st century conflict. The stakes truly couldn't be higher for the Corps and for the nation.
Wow. Okay, so this deep dive into Eric Diaz's really impactful dissertation has revealed a pretty stark reality within the United States Marine Corps. While modernization efforts are indeed underway, officially, they seem to be unevenly applied, very unevenly. This leads to significant and potentially dangerous educational inequities between officer and enlisted Marines, right in that critical entry-level MOS training. We've seen how distinct learning objectives, very different instructional methods, and these glaring resource gaps create two separate, often unequal learning paths. And these disparities, they're made worse by that understandable, maybe instructor resistance, those persistent tech shortfalls, and the deeply entrenched bureaucratic hurdles.
Yeah, and the study really powerfully underscores that addressing these disparities isn't just about fairness, although that's profoundly important for morale, for retention, for the individual Marine.
Oh.
It is absolutely fundamental to ensuring the entire force, especially that indispensable 87% who are enlisted, is truly equipped with the critical thinking, the adaptive skills needed for the complex, ambiguous challenges of modern combat. Delaying these changes, putting them off, it could genuinely compromise the very essence of Marine Corps effectiveness going forward.
So it leaves us with a pretty provocative thought, doesn't it? If the Marine Corps is truly to lead through its enlisted ranks, as it often says it does, and prepare for this ambiguous, complex future battlefield, how quickly can an organization rooted so deeply in tradition, in institutional pride, embrace such a fundamental cultural and structural shift in education? And maybe more pointedly, what is the true cost of delaying that change any further? That's certainly something for you and for us to consider.